Welcome back to another episode of a podcast ruined by a software engineer. I'm joined by the lovely Amin today, and I can't wait to get into what's going on. Amin, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing very well. Thanks for being on the show, actually.
No, you're welcome.
Just a common thing. I met you at Hirespace when we were both working there. But you have quite, I guess, an interesting and unique path as well in terms of you are currently a finance manager. And I think it's just a very interesting point because we both work at different startups. You've also had the time to work at bigger companies, so you could definitely see the difference between those two. So I'm pretty sure we're going to be able to talk all about that coming up. But for the people who don't know you, actually, I guess, can you give us a brief description of what you do, what you've been doing, and...
So currently I'm a finance manager at a startup that's in digital advertising, and they do what's called programmatic advertising. And programmatic advertising is, in a nutshell, using technology to purchase ad space. So if you're really interested, for example, like buying trainers and you've been Googling Adidas trainers all evening and you're like got your eyes set on them, and the next thing you know, every single website has an advert on the sidebar or on the main page with the Adidas trainers that you've been looking for, and you're like, okay, somebody's obviously spying on me. That is essentially what programmatic advertisers do. They use your cookie information to notice what websites you've been looking at and essentially go through the auction process to buy the ad space of, say, the website that you go on later to try and get you to eventually click through onto the ad, and then if it makes a sale, like a revenue sale from the ad.
That's a really great point because
can I just say it took me sort of several months to fully understand this because it was very, 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 very technical. Very technical, and yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you wrote this whole description down on your paper right now and just reading off of it. And I'm kidding. This is all coming from
This is all off the dome, by the way. No.
Yeah, all off the top of your head, you know? But that's really good because I think the term that people use for this is personalized ads. So whatever you do, like it kind of just follows you. It's like a footprint that you have on the internet, and people are able to like have personalized ads for whatever you buy. So the other day, I bought some contacts, and next thing you know, like every other ads that I come across are about contacts at the end. So.
Yeah, I think it's essentially advertisers are trying to get to you. So in the older days, they'll get a billboard and put it up on a motorway, or they would put an advert out in the newspaper. But the way that sort of advertising mediums change and the way we consume content change over the years, and it's especially now, it's not comparable to what admin used to doing before. It's all very sort of digital now. It's all very online. So it's a whole different ballpark. They're essentially doing the same thing that they would have done decades ago, i.e., we've got a campaign or a brand or a message that we want to sell to you, whether it's like razors or trainers or experiences or holidays, you name it. But it's just that the methods have changed significantly, and it's a lot more technical.
And when you see it's kind of like a model, and if a model works, you have all these like people getting onto it. There's bound to be some sort of competition, and you have these different strategies that people wouldn't take. So we could definitely dive into that when we get to that. But I always love going back a bit of what is Amin back in the day. So you have quite a really good lengthy finance background, and that kind of, where did that all start? Did that start during uni, or did you always have like a background in that in high school? Where did that come from?
Well, I've said it to other people who like have laughed at me, but we do GCSEs, and you're Canadian. I don't know what you guys do, but
nothing.
No. So I remember the only sort of GCSE that I sort of nailed, which wasn't really a great GCSE, was business studies. Any GCSE that does the word studies in it is not really of any repute. So business studies was one that sort of like it was really good at. I was good at maths as well, maths and business studies. And then it sort of, I guess, manifested in terms of what I gone on to study at CAS in terms of finance, because I thought I'd be a hotshot banker working in the city, popping bottles and, what's the phrase? Popping bottles.
Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah, exactly. But I missed the boat there. So no, but I'm only sort of messing around. So I did have a sort of interest really, and it's what I did at uni. And with hindsight, to be honest, you don't really need to study finance to go into finance. Really, there's plenty of people that do history degrees and do accounting qualifications afterwards. Really.
That's a great advice for a lot.
If there's any young people listening, like they always say, do what you want to do and follow your heart. And it may sound like sentimental and like sappy, but it is kind of true as well.
Yeah. I mean, I usually keep the last section for all the advice, but you're just throwing all of them out there right
I've
now.
got all
So we're going to have plenty more coming up, but it is quite relatable.
I'm here all afternoon, you know.
Yeah, you're stuck with me. No, but it is a quite shared sentiment, not just in finance, but a lot of people, when they look back and they're like, did I really need to know all of this to like do what you can do today? It's not always yes. It's not like obvious you have to do this to begin with.
That's the thing. Like, if I had a time machine, I'd go back and change it. You know, and that's probably the same with a lot of people as well. You know,
yeah.
So I'd do something different, and you know, my career wouldn't be what it is now.
But what's interesting is that, like, when you're saying you did the business studies for your GCSE, it was like an optional. Nobody forced you to take that one, and that's basically how optional courses work.
Yeah.
So how deep are we talking about? Is it more like an introductory course? Is it more just general business? Did they give you all these curves that I keep on seeing on when people study business?
I mean, you learn like basic, kind of like really basic.
Are we talking about like supply and demands, for example? Is that?
Yeah, kind of. That's more economics. But you more learn in terms of like really sort of basic information about corporate structure, how companies work, types of markets, things in terms of like really basic management theory, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and work like by Perry Tiu, but it's very like on a very kind of like basic level. You know, it's kind of like introduction because you're essentially 14, 15 and you're learning these things for the first time.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really a thing. I just did it, I think, because you kind of, especially with the UK education system, you kind of have to sort of pick and choose what you want to do.
Yeah, you test the waters a bit.
Yeah, and you know, you're not keen on that subject, but you can't do that subject because your timetable clashes. So it's sort of like a lot of it is putting square pegs in round holes as well. And yeah, and I think the thing I remember is I just was really good at it. I'm not really bragging here, but
no, but I mean, like, the fact that you remember being able to list all the actual content, and it just means that not only did you, I guess, were good at it, but also you kind of had an interest in it, as in like. You could be good at something, but if you don't have passion for it, you don't really remember anything as it goes.
Yeah, I think it's also like the very, like, you know, stereotypical immigrant background of like coming.
Tell me about it.
It's coming to this country and like, you know, what do you do to like make it in the world? You get into professions, or you become a business person, and you move up in society, that kind of thing.
We could definitely dive into at some point how finance in the real world looks like, because obviously you have loads of point of view on it, so that's gonna be really fun. So after doing that, after done your GCSE, and then you mentioned you went to Cass Business School. Was that was a major there, I guess, right in line with what you've done with that business studies, or as in what was your major basically?
It was finance, but what I guess you learn in finance is it's a very broad subject. So
yeah, can I mention that real quick? Because when people say finance, that includes accounting, that includes auditing, that includes credit control, that includes all kinds of stuff. Can you give, I guess, everybody like a big picture of what finance, in terms of departments or in terms of categories of finance, or even in a company, different roles, what is finance, I guess?
That's a good question. I guess, you know, you ask what finance is, and it's essentially the capital markets that we've had for the past, I guess, 3-4 centuries, in terms of you have individuals that have capital, and it's what they do with that capital, and it's that investment into either equity or debt, and how that manifests into, you know, the economy. So that's kind of like the holistic view of what finance is. And you can branch that off into various things because, you know, in the past 3-4 centuries, we've had lots of financial innovation, and you have things like accounting that's been there since, like, you know, the Babylonian times. Like, you have double entry bookkeeping, but you have really modern stuff like derivatives and options,
right?
Which has sort of come across because of like the financial contract between investors and people that are sort of receiving capital has evolved over time. So you've got a mix. It's very broad, and what you study, especially at university level, is a very broad thing, because it could be it goes from like economics or macro or economics in terms of how resources are allocated on a macro level in terms of a national economy, and on a micro level in terms of individuals. You've got accounting, which is between financial accounting, which I guess looks at the accounting of a corporate or a company or a firm. And then you've got management accounting, which looks at a much more granular basis in terms of how a company is affected by cost, how it sort of does its transactions on a monthly basis. And you've got things that relate to the financial markets itself. So you've got the bond market, the equity market, the derivative market. It's, people are like, what do these people do in the city? And, there's like hundreds and thousands of jobs there. And, you've got, it's like a multitude of things really. And I think that's also, I've had to explain to a lot of people in terms of what finance is about and what kind of things happen. It just goes to show that there really isn't much education in terms of, especially, I guess, on the younger level.
My follow-up question actually is that you've given us so much gold so far.
I'm done now. I'm just going to pack up and go.
Don't go. How much of this did you know by the time you graduated with that program, I guess? By the time you graduated, how much of, I guess, this distinction between all these facets was clear to you?
I mean, you do get the theoretical knowledge, but you also get, I guess, but a lot of it comes afterwards. Like, they talk about like life experience and like learning from other people that are, been there, done that. That's worth its weight in gold, and you don't really get that in the classroom.
Exactly. A lot of times when you are studying that thing, when we talk about Wolf of Wall Street, it's because movies, and then they take.
I haven't seen that. I've seen Wall Street, the original with Michael Douglas. That's a good film, but not Wolf of Wall Street.
Oh man, you're a finance guy and you haven't seen it. Outrageous. I mean,
yeah, but I think that's...
No, can't blame you on it. But I guess it's relatable for people in software engineering, because like I'm a software engineer, and when people talk about it, they're like, "What is software engineering?" Do you like a lot of people confuse it with IT, for example. Even though IT is technically doesn't piss me off. Okay. It's just different. But it's just that like in software engineering, you have like people working on mobile apps, people working on web apps, people working on desktop apps. It's all different like environment within that umbrella of software engineering.
But I think with software engineering, it kind of like it just works. Like I think that the roles and what people do and the industry just works. But when finance and when it like goes tits up, it has ramifications on an economy and on society.
And politically, it has impact as well.
Exactly. So you have like the financial crisis in 2008, 2009.
And even one more recently, mini one recently.
Exactly. It destroyed like the economies of like Iceland, Ireland, all because like, financiers were packaging up. Yeah.
And the concept that I was talking about when you're mentioning all these scenarios of loans, mortgage, bonds, and all that. People were loaning money to each other since throughout time. Like back in the day, people were loaning money.
Yeah,
and it's also
you just have to read Shakespeare. Like The Merchant of Venice is all about that. You got the moneylender there. That was I won't say anti-hero, but the antagonist, Shylock. You have it in history that moneylenders exist, and it's kind of like it's a double-edged sword because people don't want to be ripped off. But
are you sure?
I'm fairly certain of that. People don't want to be ripped off, so you see that somebody's lending money and they're charging interest, and they see that this angle of like, okay, there's also like somebody being ripped off here, but it's a double-edged sword of like, how do you get sort of capital allocated from people that do have money to invest in, but people that want to like set up their own businesses or invest or move forward in life really. So it is a double-edged sword really in terms of how capital is allocated, and people have different views about it. And,
well, of course,
and there's a lot of innovation nowadays in terms of like new entrants in the markets, in terms of how companies and people raise money nowadays that just didn't exist like 10, 15 years ago.
That's a great point. And I guess like after doing uni, you definitely work in different kind of startups and all that. And when you work in startups, you have that kind of exposure to raising monies and all of it. But I just want to finish off the chapter where you said you went to Cass Business School. I guess you definitely learned a lot of knowledge in terms of how got different facets and all that. But you also had a year abroad during that time.
Yeah.
Can you talk us more about that? And where was it? How exciting it was, and how related it is to what you did?
It was very exciting. It was at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and Urbana-Champaign is the name of the town. And where is Urbana-Champaign? Is it probably what everybody's thinking is essentially it's in the middle of central Illinois,
Right.
surrounded by like miles and miles of cornfields, because that's essentially what they grow out there. And so, in practical terms, it was 3 hours, I guess, drive south of Chicago.
Okay.
So I don't know how much that would be, like miles, kilometers. And it was great. I grew up in London and I went to uni in London, but I wanted a bit of a break and a bit of a different sort of environment. So a year abroad option was available, and I could have literally gone to like most countries in the world actually, in the Far East, in like Europe, America, Canada as well. And I thought I'd go to America, see what all the fuss was about. So I had two options, Atlanta or Illinois, and I decided to go to like the smallest town I could find.
Yeah, but I mean, it's also good because you get a completely different shift of context, as you were saying. So you're learning business at Cass in London.
Yeah.
Doing, I guess, business school. And then you have the year abroad. Were the topics quite similar? I guess you also had friends who were doing the same program still in London during that time.
I mean, the university itself would like match it up in terms of like this is our partner institution, and kind and keep it the continuity of it flowing. But in terms of like, you know, what you learn out there compared to what you learn over here, finance is very international.
Yeah.
So, you know, otherwise you wouldn't have like business across borders between different countries and companies. So if you get aside from the language barrier, there isn't much of a finance barrier.
That makes sense, actually.
So currently, for the company I work for, Avocet, we have a US company as a subsidiary. So I will deal with our US accountants in terms of preparing our sort of filings for year end, and so communicating them is not an issue because, you know, they understand what I'm talking about in terms of terms and definitions and things, and they understand what I'm talking about.
One thing that I always wanted to figure out actually is that when you go to school, a lot of the topics they're related to events or examples in the location you're at. So for example, if you go to school, and I went to school in Canada, a lot of the examples of the history stuff will be examples from Canada. Yeah. Did you notice that trend when you studied in the US, that a lot of the examples will use like US companies to mark certain examples, or that they still have kind of like a, I guess, broader range to cover that?
It would depend on the class. I mean, if you're doing an international economics class, they'll talk about like, you know, Latin American economies and stuff like that. But in terms of like sort of finance and accounting, it would overwhelmingly be American. Which wouldn't, and I remember there was like an investment portfolio class I was in where we had essentially a portfolio, and the group of like 20 or 30 of us would invest, and it would overwhelmingly be on American like companies and stocks.
That was one single portfolio for everybody, or is it one each?
No. So the details, the class itself, this was like a 4th year class, so this was like for seniors over there.
About to graduate.
So for their final year, they had a portfolio class where they essentially had like a rich investor that decided to donate money for the university to say like, here is X amount, run a portfolio class, invest that money. So I'm not sure what the person got out of it in terms of like actual like monetary gain. But
you didn't see any of that profit.
No, we didn't. But we get the experience of like actually pitching real like investment recommendations, and it could actually be invested in rather than sort of a
fake virtual.
Yeah, like a what do they call, like a hypothetical trading simulator or a portfolio that's not really. So you got what's called like skin in the game, you know, you're actually, you know.
That's what I was going to say, because when you told me it was actually real money to, I guess, being put into portfolio and everything, was that a common practice among business schools, or was it just specific, I guess, your case that it happened?
I can't say whether it was common or not. I was definitely the first I've ever heard of it, and
I'm going to find that out. If I get any other business students out there talking to me, I'm definitely going to find that out if it's a common practice. Because
I kind of like winged my way into it because I shouldn't have been on that class, but I sort of came in and I saw what the class was about, and because I was technically 2nd/3rd year, but this was like for 4th year students. who have really done well. You'd had to be like really good.
So you just got early exposure. You just got premature exposure.
I just went. I remember going to the professor, and the first week or so, and just like went to his office and just like explained who I am, and just sort of, I guess, blagged it really.
Well, I mean, the lesson here is you got to reach out. The lesson here, you'll never know if you don't reach out. So
the lesson is that a bit of charisma can go a long way.
Oh man, that's a great advice.
Or an accent in a foreign country can.
Oh, I'm doing my best now,
Yeah, definitely.
That's great, actually. So, I mean, even before getting out of uni, you've seen so much and like even gotten a chance to have realistic cases. I think from that point, then, in terms of did you have like a mind fixed on what exactly wanted to do coming out of uni, or was it just see what's out there? And
I did. I did want to go into investment management, so asset management. So that essentially is what we did in that class, but on a bigger scale of firms managing funds to invest in. So it could be in a variety of investments like equity, bonds, or whatever to meet their clients' objectives. So that can be done on a retail level or like on a high net worth of an individual level as well. Like if none of these terms are meaning anything, just let me know.
I think it does make a lot of sense when you're saying in like asset management. That's I guess a lot of people do aspire to do that, and there are really that amount of opportunities out there to really tackle it. So when you graduated uni, what was your first, I guess, opportunity to work as an adult?
So like I'm gonna hold my hands up. I didn't get into asset management, and it's
all right.
Yeah, no, I didn't. Which was disappointing because it was what I wanted to do when I wanted to graduate, but it just didn't work out. And it's kind of like, okay, well, this sucks, but what can you do really?
But you still had like similar, I guess it wasn't exactly that, but you still managed to get knowledge to it as you did other kind of jobs. You still get the knowledge of being able to do that kind of responsibilities as I guess. So from what I remember, you told me you were like a data analyst when you came out. So
yeah, so what I did in my first job was completely sort of unrelated in terms of finance at all. So I joined actually as a data assistant, but was promoted to a data analyst eventually.
That's pretty cool.
And it was for a publication essentially they were like in a shipping container in Chelsea on the King's Road. So I don't know if you've been to that part of town, but it's very plush, very nice, And it was interesting because I think for a lot of people that they go on a graduate scheme, and it's very kind of like structured. And what they do since then is,
I didn't, but I definitely do know people who's done that path.
Yeah, so it's very structured, regiment, and you're kind of like, it's a natural progression of like you're getting 3 years of university, and then you're into like a 2-year graduate program, and you're continuing the structure of your career trajectory. But I didn't. It was kind of like a startup environment that I went into, so it was a very small company of up to 15 people, and they were a publication that published a variety of sort of news articles and reports on sort of private finance initiative projects and renewable projects. And I was in a data team because they had a data package so people that weren't going on there to look at their articles on, say, renewable projects could also log onto the database and find out about the renewable industry as well.
But that's all these skills that are like translatable, even though you're not directly analyzing assets or not, but it's really just have a analytical mind to begin with. And I guess that's really helps people shine at that point. But when you were mentioning like the mold of like going into uni and having these grad scheme program and all that, I think that's like the ideal situation. I don't think realistically everybody gets into it. I've never done any internships during uni, which I guess was kind of part of the mold as well. When you go to uni during the summer, you do internship, and then that. I didn't really fit into it. And then kind of same mindset when I got out of uni, it was more like, what now? I wanted to be the next Bill Gates or something like that. But if you look at how you've become, it's just a story that is quite relatable to, I'm sure, a lot of people out there that didn't fit exactly I did this grad scheme or anything, but you still managed to practice what you learned and analytical stuff at that point.
Yeah, I don't want to get into like what they call sort of wisdom about just follow your dreams and it will work out, and it helps to go on a grad scheme because not only having that structure, but you are in an environment where you do learn from people. And if it is the industry or the company that you want to work for, that's all the better because you're getting that exposure really early on.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't work out, you don't go into grad scheme. It doesn't mean the doors, the path's blocked or whatever. You just have to go through a different door.
Nobody has ever told me that, but I'll keep that in mind.
And it's difficult because hindsight's a wonderful thing, and if we all had time machines, we'll be all living like billionaires right now. But I think a lot of people, especially young people who don't have, I guess, especially growing up in an environment where this sort of professional career is a common thing, and either your parents want white collar professionals or something. It's quite difficult to know what the routes are, what the pathways are, and if you don't have, say, mentors as well.
That's important.
Yeah, to help you. So it can be difficult. It's not easy. There's a lot of stuff out there in terms of the internet now, definitely, that that wasn't there, say, like a couple of generations ago in terms of information. So it does exist, but it's like, what are you looking at in terms of I think practical information. Really,
it's definitely true in terms of like if it's there, if you're able to do these scenarios, grad schemes, and then or internships that leads directly to a job. That's like obviously the perfect story at that point. But I mean, you're able to pick up where, as you're saying, keep the doors open. Don't really say no to any opportunity for no good reason, and always push yourself out there, because that's exactly how life is at that point.
Yeah.
But what I did want to ask you actually was that was there a moment when you were doing when you were a data analyst in terms of something that wowed you in the, I guess, real life as opposed to being in school? Was there a moment where you're like, so much data, like so much information, how? Or I guess it could be perfectly fine when it's like you kind of expected it. If you really did expect this kind of, I guess, environment or context, that could be perfectly fine as well.
To be honest, I'm going to say no, really. I think it just wasn't right for me. It was good in terms of the experience, but I think it also is about your interests as well, because you can have like reams and reams of data about like anything you want, really. You could, set up a database about like vacuum cleaners.
I mean, and I would be pretty interested in that. If there's somebody out there who's going to be interested, it might be me at that point.
So you can learn the data skills and then apply it to something that you're interested in, fair enough. But if it's, I wasn't particularly interested in terms of like the work the company did, so it just didn't really sell to me.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then I had a finance background as well, so to my mind, it was nice to try, but it wasn't really my cup of tea, which is a shame, really, because there's a lot of useful things that you can do with data as well.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, they have loads of fields nowadays of like, data analysts or data engineers specifically just for that. So you could have to see the evolution to it. But at the same time, when you're talking about finance, it's always adaptable to so many cases and scenarios. So I guess there was another opportunity after that you were able to use your analytical mind on top of your finance background. So that was a credit controller role?
That's when, I joined Hirespace. I think it was a few months after I went on holiday in America in between. And then I came back and then joined Hirespace. And at the time, I think I was the first finance person that Hirespace hired. And it was a very small company as well. So I guess 20 people, roughly, I think, at that time. And just looking back, go for it.
No, I mean, like, there's so many good things to, I guess, talk about in this case, because you were saying that being the first person joining a finance team, as in having a startup and then having this role that opens up and creates. So from your point of view, I'm definitely going to dive into that to see how you start from there and then the impact of it. And also, like, I guess for the people who just in a general picture, what is a credit controller, or what did you do? What some use cases that you ended up coming across there?
Like for a lot of businesses, especially small ones, cash is the lifeline of the companies, because if you don't have cash to sort of for operating costs, you're not gonna succeed. You're gonna go insolvent. You can't pay your creditors, you can't pay your bills, but if you don't have any cash. And it's unfortunate as well that there is an industry for credit control and chasing debt, because in an ideal world, you just want companies to pay each other on time but we don't live in that ideal world, unfortunately. So that's where credit controllers come in, and essentially ensure that the cash is coming in so the business can continue to generate future growth and carry on trading.
And is it fair to say that just credit control is a very important aspect or a major component of any finance team out there nowadays for any company, any sizes? Credit control is something that needs to be there.
Well, I think it also depends on your business model, because different businesses have different ways of collecting money and the different terms of payment. So if you're in a sort of very cash generative business where you're collecting the money at point of sale, then you're dreaming, really, because you don't really need to do much in terms of collections. But a lot of businesses that have, say, 30-day terms, which is common and it's just probably standard in industry, it's not the same sort of, I guess, situation where you have that luxury, because you're basically ensuring that you're trusting that the other party will pay you, say, on day 30 or earlier. And by and large, it is the case, but it depends on the industry itself that it's not the case. And some industries are better than others, and some companies are better than others in terms of, I guess, collections. Like DFA would be better because just the type of company it is, in terms of where it is and who they're dealing with, that they wouldn't have much issues than, say, a smaller company.
How they're positioned as well, like.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, for example, I'm in digital advertising right now, and it's just very kind of notorious that companies just don't pay each other. They just don't pay each other. They will run campaigns and essentially be like, we're done with the campaign, and then sail off to the wind.
So from a commoner's point of view, or like more in layman terms at this point, is that the use case would be you have some sort of contractual business with another company, and then the whole business happens and execute, but then you have one company not paying the other, and this is where kind of the credit control in to make sure that that amount gets paid at the end. I guess from your experience, you've definitely got the chance to see loads of it. What are the different methods, or what are the different approaches? Imagine a smaller company out there, and there's somebody else owing them money. What kind of options they have to, I guess, assure this contractual obligation?
Sure. I guess there's a variety of things. I think communication is the most important thing. You're doing your basics of like knowing who your customer are, your KYC checks, knowing who your customers are, signing a contractual agreement where it's kind of very kind of watertight in terms of what you're offering in terms of goods and services. And once it's raised, the invoices are raised, and from there on, it's making sure that the invoices go to the right people and knowing what their processes are in place in terms of processing payment. So once you've done your kind of like background checks in terms of making sure everything's fine from the get-go, you're hoping that invoices are by and large processed on time, and they generally are. So the worst case scenarios where they don't get paid, it could be quite innocuous reasons in terms of the person that you're dealing on the other side has left the company, and the person that's now come in is not aware of what's going on. They're not being like looped in on emails or whatever. Other examples are that it could be the case of the company on the other side are just having problems with their cash flow at the moment, and they want to pay you, but they're just holding off paying you because they just can't at this moment of time. It's quite a minority of cases where you get companies are actively not wanting to pay you. It's more of a case of their businesses, I guess, performance isn't really susceptible in terms of paying you. But in the cases where they are not paying you, there are sort of steps you can take. I think the credit controller itself is ensuring that communication is open. You're chasing them in terms of emails, telephone calls, getting a message to the right people, finding out why payment's not being made, and then trying to like resolve it. There are options of like understanding in terms of if payment's not being made, can we offer, say, a payment plan, for example, or be in a situation where I guess take a hit. But there's a lot of things that can be done. I mean, it is a very case by case industry. There's not really, say, like a universal formula that you can
Yeah,
write
like
about.
a step-by-step guide. They're like, do this or that, do this or that.
And it's also that a lot of, say, companies on the other side, say especially the bigger companies, they have like very kind of like formulaic finance process in terms of payables, and it can be very kind of time consuming. So the reason why they haven't paid is that you haven't done like step 7 out of 10 or whatever, or something that hasn't worked through.
Exactly. And especially when we get exposure to working in all these kind of different startups, everybody has their own case of like whether they can pay money or they're waiting somebody else to pay their money. It's always something that people have to consider at that point. So
yeah, definitely. And I think there's a lot going on in terms of collection now. There's a lot of apps that people can utilize in terms of sending out reminders, ensuring that you have the software in place of seeing when invoices become overdue, and to help small companies and especially startups. There's a lot that sort of you can use that plugs into, say, like, Xero or QuickBooks.
Yeah.
And that pulls your accounting data and uses the data to find out who are sort of bad companies in terms of like paying on time and who are good companies, and you can modify your credit control strategy based on the company itself.
That's so good, because that obviously it's all about reputation at that point. And then if you're able to even keep that in check, not only will it have a obviously financial impact, but it'll have even like a social impact, or if they're able to make this kind of ecosystem of knowing what company is good at this, good at that, it obviously helps with the brand at the end of the day.
Definitely, and it's a business relationship at the end of the day, because I've always said that there's no point being or having a business relationship with a company that's not paying you.
Yeah.
Like, you can generate all the revenue and the sales that'll look all flashy, but if the cash isn't coming in the bank, then what's the point, really?
I'm glad somebody said it. I'm glad somebody said that at that point. So, and also, I just want to point out that I guess if there are companies out there that really has to resort to the last issue, they do have help from either legal help. I guess they have legal helps or governmental help to solve any of these issues.
Yeah, there are sort of tools, I guess, in terms of actual legislation that you can charge interest and penalty fines, and if it gets to a stage where they're not sort of budging, you can get sort of legal debt collectors that I've used before in the past. They can help out in terms of chasing, and it kind of looks a bit more serious than, rather than you're sending an email, somebody from a debt collection agency is sending like a formal letter of request. It adds a bit of more gravitas about it. You can end up taking them to small claims court and just filing a form on HMRC's or no .gov website, and take them to court. And it's a time-consuming process. It's not difficult. There's definitely tools out there. So if companies are having issues receiving payment from other companies, as long as they're still trading, there are a lot of steps that people can take to recover sort of debts.
That's actually pretty cool, because we're still in the finance world. We're still, everything that you've studied and we've been talking is directly related to this, but you don't really know the processes and how to do it until you actually get pitched into that situation to deal with it. So that's the kind of exposure, I guess, when you come out, because in school nobody really teaches you like how to do any of these forms or any of these apps or all that. So these are all real scenarios that you have to deal with when you actually have
I've heard that before. It's like, when you're in school and it's like, oh, nobody teaches you about taxes. Well, it's like, you're 14. Do you actually want to learn about taxes?
Is it relevant at that time to know? Everybody loves taxes, right?
I think there's obviously there's a time and place of learning these things, and you want to be learning in an environment where it's easy to understand.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to be in an environment where like tax rules are complicated, because it just doesn't fit the purpose, really.
Yeah. And we could just have a really brief mention on taxes and companies, actually. So companies are encouraged to keep all the receipts and everything for the purpose of they get some tax returns from it, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So I guess for the people that don't exactly know what this concept is, even for the smaller companies, what's the benefit of this?
If you're VAT registered, you're VAT registered over, I think it's 85,000 turnover a year. So if you generate 85,000 of sales every year, you have to get VAT registered. And value-added tax is not really like sales tax that you have in other countries. You're thinking, say, I think a really simple example is just look at the chain of, say, like a radio that's been produced.
Mm-hmm.
Or something more simple, actually. I'm trying to think of something that you bought, like materials to make.
Yeah, just any object, anything that you could buy and make. And
Yeah, so this mug that I'm holding,
yeah.
say if you're a mug manufacturer, you obviously need to source the materials for the mugs, whatever it is, the ceramics or the clay or whatever, and buy the raw materials. So you'll be buying the raw materials from another company, and that would have a tax on it, value-added tax.
Mm-hmm.
You can reclaim that tax element of it because it's a purchase that you're making to produce something. So you produce the mugs and then you sell it to your consumer, and that consumer will buy the mug for like £5 plus VAT. So it's be £5.
Yeah. So
£6 essentially, and then you, as a seller, would have to pay HMRC the VAT on that. It should sort of cancel, and then the tax man will take the difference between the VAT at the higher end of the change, and then deduct it from the lower end of the change, and then whatever that difference is, you pay the VAT tax. So that's why it's called value-added tax, because every step you're adding value on the transaction. Does this make sense? I hope I'm...
Yeah, correct. Because there's multiple steps to begin with. You're starting with different ingredients, and then you end up manufacturing a product, and then you sell the product to the consumer, and then the person that buys it. And all these steps, all this value that you added to it, that's how you have the value-added tax. And it's definitely encouraged for any business out there to get your VAT returns, just because it's tax money that you have paid, but you could return them through these encouraging programs that the
Of course.
government.
I mean, I think most companies will, if they're not, they will have like an accountant who will explain that if you are making revenue of that amount, you need to be registered VAT and then file VAT returns.
Yeah, that's one of the great things of working at startups. I don't work in finance to begin with, but I get exposed to all these kind of scenarios, and I'm just happy to learn about all this stuff. But speaking of working in startups, there was quite a shift after that. So after working at Harspace, you did work for the Football Association, the FA, as we all know it.
That's correct.
Is it correct to say that is not a startup?
That is correct. It's not a startup. I think I went from working from a company of 30 people to a company of like 800 people. So it's quite a big shift in terms of the size, and obviously we're based at Wembley Stadium, and I think before joining, I didn't even know there was offices at Wembley Stadium.
I was gonna say, because I don't think most people know that the FA's HQ is at Wembley Stadium. But I guess from your point of view,
they spent sort of £800 million on the stadium. You think that they'll just like bung in a few offices inside?
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about what it looks like in there. But I guess what did you come in as? Like, I guess what was your role there? What kind of responsibilities you had to do at the FA?
So the finance team, because it's such a big organisation, and with like a lot of big organisations, you are like a cog in the machine, and the finance team is, say, the machine, and within that cog is the receivables cog, and with receivables essentially is the money that's coming into the FA, and within that I was part of the cog that is collections for, there's 3 companies for the FA that they have, 3 limited companies, and it was the collections for those 3 without the Club Wembley stuff. Then Club Wembley is the corporate packages and hospitality that they offer.
Right.
So I would have been doing credit control, invoice raising, receivables, accounts receivable, just general accounts receivable stuff for the 3 companies off the FA.
And that's for any events happening at Wembley, whether it be a concert, would it be a football match, whether it be anything.
Yeah, but it was just like a sliver of like the overall business. So you had like the event side at Wembley Stadium, so they do concerts and football events, but there was also the Football Association Limited, which was what we expect the FA to do, managing the national game with sort of county associations, football clubs, and then you have the other smaller side of the business, which is the NFC, the National Football Centre, which is a new training centre up in Burton. But yeah, so it was a wide sort of, it's a massive company, but in terms of like the scope of the role, very, very wide, and nothing that I was sort of used to before.
So I mean, considering the background you had before joining it was quite suited in terms of like being able to adapt all these different situations of account receivables and.
Yeah, I guess so. I didn't really find it daunting in a sense, in terms of what it was. I guess doing my finance degree, you sort of learn a wide variety of things that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And
what
sort of prepares you, I guess. going into that environment where there's a lack of why things to work on.
That's the thing. One thing that from my point of view is that when you have people coming out of school and all that, when you get the opportunity to deal with this big amount of money, I guess, what's the effect on you? Is it awing, or also like the pressure? Was there any kind of pressure in terms of messing up, or I guess like what kind of range of money we're talking about? I guess is it like in the billions? I don't think it was in the billions, but like what?
There was definitely pressure, and I did mess up a couple of times. I'm not perfect, and I'm probably going to leave it at that. But in terms of the scope, I mean, I think the FA's turnover roughly is like 300 million. So
jeez,
right. Massive. And you know they have the calendar in terms of fixtures for England home games and the FA Cup final, which are big events. But in the summer you have the concert season, and you have, God, I'm gonna sound really uncool name on Bon Jovi, and I'm trying to think who else came. Like Coldplay, Ed Sheeran, I think Spice Girls as well, like really like big like pop stars, and they would rent the stadium out, and it would cost sort of 6 figures. No, sorry, 7 figures actually.
Jeez, right.
6-7 figures, yeah. So in terms of did I find it awe-inspiring? Not really. I think
just numbers at the end of the day.
I think it is just numbers. You sort of get desensitized to it, and you know, at higher space, I wasn't dealing with these kind of numbers that they deal with the FA. You know, the size of the invoices weren't comparable at all. You know, the commercial contracts that the FA have with sort of broadcasters, sponsors, licensees, they're massive. They're huge numbers, and you kind of just sort of go in there and just think, oh, it's just a number. It's just a number on a screen. Yeah. Obviously, it means a lot in terms of actual practicality, but you don't see that. You don't see those numbers. And
conceptually, you're plugging numbers here and there. It doesn't matter what the number is. You're just plugging numbers over there, and then
I guess so. I mean, an invoice raised for £100 is going to be raised the same way for an invoice for £1 million. And you just got to make sure that the decimal place is in the right place, otherwise, you can get.
It's also that confidence and also the experience of being able to handle this situation that probably justifies why, I guess, you wouldn't be completely stressed out or awed out by being exposed to, hey, this invoice is a couple of $1 million.
No, there was definitely the pressure of, I had the responsibility of making sure that the commercial contractual money comes in, but it's not.
You're not going to lose sleep over it every night just because.
You can't, but the thing is, it's not an environment where you should just pin it all on one person, because they have a commercial department at the FA, and they're the ones signing the contracts with, these companies, these third-party companies. And if it's a case of not paying, it's obviously me finding out why they're not paying and trying to get them to pay. But,
of course.
I'd be utilising the commercial team over there to sort of help along, because they're the ones having the business relationship. And it's quite difficult because, especially at the FA, there's a lot of politics as well in terms of...
I can imagine.
Yeah, it's... because they're the ones the ones in the commercial department are the ones doing the wining and dining, and they're taking clients out to big fancy restaurants with big extensive menus, and you're not there, so there is that element of their sort of trying to smoothing and being on their good sides.
Yeah.
But it's the thing that we talked about earlier. It's like, why be in a business relationship with someone who's not paying you? They're essentially using you. I'm not saying what they did was this, but I'm saying that you're in an environment where somebody's utilizing your services or using your name or whatever, and you're not getting paid for it.
Yeah, and it really needs to know the behind the scenes to really get the grasp of it. But what I do want to transition, actually, when we were talking about earlier, we were talking about startups, the environment, like quite cozy, smaller teams, everybody knows each other. What did that look like in a more bigger company, major company like the Football Association? Did you find some similarities in smaller teams where people are really close knit, or was it more like corporate, heads down, do your thing? What was the lifestyle, I guess?
I think it shifted in terms of the sort of the ownership, which sort of changed in terms of the management over time. Initially, it was very kind of like jovial and much more close knit, and then towards the end, it wasn't. And it's a difficult one because you can't really choose who you work with.
Yep.
You kind of have to go in a workplace and then hope that the people you get along with, you don't rub them off the wrong way, and they don't rub you off the wrong way, and that causes tension. I think by and large most people are nice people to be around. There's obviously
you hope so.
There's obviously a few bad apples in the barrel, and you can be in a situation where things can be toxic for whatever reason. I think, does it compare in terms of sort of say startups or a bigger organization? I think it will just depend on the people, to be honest, and especially from the top.
Right.
So it's how the people at the top, how do they behave, and how does it trickle down into sort of like sort of how they treat
the atmosphere and how you see between each
how
other
they treat junior staff and how they sort of behave in terms of their management style. And I don't think there's a difference between, say, big companies or smaller companies. I think it just depends on who's in there, really.
That's a good way to look at it. And if we talk specifically about like perks and stuff, like did you have any significant perks at the FA, I guess? For example, we had pool tables, we had I guess avocados here and there at Space, and I guess at the FA, did they have anything similar or?
Well, we had free FA Cup final tickets.
That's a great perk.
We also had a free England tickets as well, which isn't probably comparable.
And I guess the lifestyle, like free lunches here and there, it's just something that I guess some people would be interested in knowing.
Yeah, well, I guess there would be sort of social events where you don't have to pay for things. So like we did one of those escape room things. We did a bowling event. We did some various sort of social things, and there'd be team lunches.
And then beers, obviously, after work once in a while.
Yeah, there'd be sort of other social things like that as well. I don't think it's comparable to a startup. I think startups are much more in tune in terms of what their employees want. And I think the type of person that would work at the FA would be typically older and have like family. And comparison to someone at a startup who's probably just say moved to London in their 20s and doesn't have that sort of commitments or responsibilities, are just looking to like enjoy themselves more.
That's the thing.
So I think the type of employee was definitely different. It's not to say like the FA was boring. There was fun people there, and you could have fun times with certain people, but I think they just attract a different type of employee.
Yeah, of course, because at least they do think about having these experience between the team. I guess even if it's a much older company and much bigger there, they do also put the emphasis on getting it going. But we actually just talk about what you're doing nowadays at your latest role. So you're a finance manager at Avocet.
Yeah.
And then
which I described earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of digital marketing and all that, and how's the shift? How's the shift from going from a startup to bigger association? I'm guessing Avocet could be called more of a startup than an actual
it is definitely
company.
A startup. And I think towards the end of FA, I was looking to move on, and it was a case of what do I do next? And I remember my time at Space quite fondly, and I thought definitely want to work for a startup again. It's just the environment I much prefer.
And in terms of what you actually do day to day, is it quite similar across all three roles, or was there always something like?
Well, it's a very small company, so it's 10 people, and similar to Space, I am the first finance employee, and they previously used a couple of accounting firms, which I won't name, that didn't go well in terms of doing the work that the company asked for. So they thought, let's get somebody in. Thankfully, they hired me.
Well, justifiably so.
Just hopefully. So in terms of it's much broader. So I would guess I'm currently in what would be considered a financial controller position, maybe a CFO position if I'm bragging, in terms of
I guess responsibility and what you need to be able to do and what you.
Well, yeah, I think CFOs are probably a bit too step far, but definitely in terms of managing the bookkeeping on a day-to-day basis, receivables, purchases, payroll as well now, expenses, just everything in terms of the financial operations.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about finance in like a company, you have finance and it's branched down to like the operational side in terms of what you do on a transactional basis, day-to-day. Bank reconciliations, bookkeeping, raising invoices, and then you've got the sort of, I guess, commercial side of finance where you're analysing the business's finances to see where you can make efficiencies, savings. You're also analysing numbers in terms of what how the financing of the company should be structured in terms of equity and debt, raising money, whether that's through sort of angel investors, VCs,
bank institutions, even.
Yeah, you name it. There's a lot of capital out there.
So, and you definitely need somebody who's been exposed to all these kind of different like scenarios, even if you haven't like obviously had your hands deep in every single one of them.
Sure.
It's not only that you have the background of going to school and all that, but also being able to actually see them real use cases that you actually got to manage. So I guess that is a very exciting project for you going on at the moment.
Definitely.
One thing I do want to get into is I guess there's the kind of like the structure of how you work kind of thing. There was a period I remember that you weren't doing I guess a full-time like 9 to 5 kind of period. So how did that lifestyle looks like for somebody that I guess getting into finance? Like for example, the classic when you get into a I guess full-time role is 9 to 5, 9 to 6 probably nowadays. You go to work and everything. So how did that lifestyle affect you, and how did you manage that in the past couple of years?
So you're talking about currently?
Currently or even before?
Yeah, so at Highspace I was part-time, I remember, and then the FA was a full-time gig, and then now I'm back to part-time again. And I think it's the bigger organizations don't realize it, but there's a lot of technology out there in terms of accounting and finance that you essentially don't need the manpower. You can get technology to help you out. I mean, we use packages that tie into Xero. So Xero is, I think every man and their dog is using Xero now in terms of accounting software, especially if you're a SME. But there's a lot in terms of the ecosystem that the Xero has in terms of its marketplace, in terms of plug-in apps and third-party software that pulls your financial data from Xero, and you can use it for, say, payroll or expenses or receivables or purchasing. For example, we use a plugin called Receipt Bank. They're based in Shoreditch, actually, not far from where we are. And they do our purchasing for us, where if we have a purchase invoice for, say, an invoice that comes in that we need to pay, we would input it into Receipt Bank software, and they will just essentially use AI and machine learning to pull the information from the invoice and do all the data entry for us. So at the FA, they would get an invoice that comes in, and someone would manually type in the data into the software. This is the invoice date, this is the amount, this is the description. And nowadays you can just get software that does it for you. And it's not just sort of purchasing, there's a variety of sort of software out there. So there's a lot of exciting changes in terms of what's going on out there, in terms of accounting, apps and software that hopefully should hit the mainstream, really.
Yeah, but it also allows you to be more flexible on your own time, given that there's tools out there too.
It is. I mean, it is like a double-edged sword where you don't want to end up becoming unemployed because the machines end up doing your work. So if there is anyone that's sort of wanting to go into industry, is definitely utilize these tools, but also find out what you can add value in terms of your input, your sort of experience of like financial analysis and I guess running things very efficiently, having that sort of clarity in your mind of knowing what a finance function ought to look like and how things, I guess in terms of processes, how things ought to be efficient as well.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, people who know me, I'm obsessed with processes. I'm just being, I guess being exposed, the exposure and all that kind of really just builds up the term experience at the end of the day. And I don't think any machine is going to be able to justify human experience at the end of the day. So, I mean, not exactly true with all the models coming out, but that's another topic for another time. What is interesting that you did mention previously is raising funds. Raising funds in terms of, from a startup scene, I don't think you have to raise funds for FA. Maybe some scenarios you'll have to raise funds for FA, but that's slightly different.
The FA would mostly get their money from contractual contracts that they have. So
right,
they've got a broadcasting agreement with like BT and BBC. So that's where they'll get their revenue from. They would get a grant from Sport England, which is a quasi-public fund money, I guess, really. And then a lot of their other income would be from their Club Wembley seats, so their corporate hospitality seats as well. Okay,
that does make sense, actually. What's interesting, I think, for a lot of people, actually, from a smaller scene on the startups bit, where there's a lot of people who are considering VCs, or people that consider bootstrapping, which is not taking any funds, or actually, I guess, sharing a part of the project with these investments, people who are ready to invest. So I guess, I mean, considering all your experience, what is your point of view on it? As in, should people stick to just not taking any funds, or should they actually consider that as like a must to be bigger?
I mean, it's all very well. I'm not a founder, so I haven't sort of set my company and saying like you should do this and you should do that. But
I think it's just your point of view. I
yeah,
guess,
but my thing is you'd rather own 50% of something that's worth something than 100% of something that's not owned something. If that makes sense. So I think it's all in terms of, say, an individual's person's, if they're an entrepreneur and setting up their business, what do they want to get out of it? Is it something where they eventually do want to sell up in a few years' time? Is it something that they actually, it's their passion and want to do for, the foreseeable future for decades and decades? Is it something that they want to do, but I guess would happily go in arrangement with, say, another company or a VC firm? It's it's a very case by case thing. And my thinking is definitely that it's better to be a part owner of something that's worth a lot than 100% owner of something that's worth not a lot.
Perfect. And it also depends on somebody if they have previously done it or not already, and then they get to make these decisions of being 100% owner of something.
Sure. But it's quite rare because a lot of most startups that you see, especially like the unicorns that you see in terms of fintech, like Monzo and Revolut. They've got VC funding. They've got big money in terms of American money or European venture capitalist funds investing in them, and even smaller players. There's a lot of money out there in terms of investors, and it's attractive for investors for a lot of reasons. They get tax relief in terms of EIS schemes. There's not a lot going on in terms of interest rates. So interest rates are very low at the moment for the past 10 years. So, and if you're an investor, it's like, where do I put my money to get a return? Yeah. So it's attractive in that sense as well. And always people like the romantic thing of like, oh, this is going to be the next Google. Yeah. I'm going to invest in this and that's it. Job done. I'm going to be.
Oh man. Yeah. And then like at that point, even if you retire or not, you still have something to look forward to, and then you can just always play more at that. Actually, I want to dive just real quickly into like, I guess, the logistics behind it in terms of, I mean, it might not be 100% true for every single VC pitching out there, but I guess what is the general steps in terms of, do you have to open your books every time you approach a VC, or I guess what kind of documents kind of they ask for? Or
definitely. I mean, like for a venture capitalist, they're going to do their due diligence. They're going to have I guess, it's going to depend on who it is, but they will have a checklist of what they want in terms of information, and definitely financial information will be up there. They want to know what your sort of revenue is, what your costs been, what are your projected revenues going to be, what's your monthly revenue, what's your sort of burn rate in terms of cash, we know how much cash are you going through on a monthly basis, because from their perspective they are investing in something that's quite risky, because presuming that they don't know who you are, they're going to have to ascertain who you are first, and once they do know who you are, like, is this person worth investing in? Is this company, is it unique? Is it going to like generate the sales, the revenues? So there's a lot of questions, and
so many factors. Everything.
It's quite rare to like jump into bed to someone straight away. You gotta get the steps that lead there. Really.
Wine and dine first. That's really good, because I mean this is happening every day, especially because we got to live in London, where there's so many companies and everybody's facing this kind of issue. It's always good to have discussion going on.
Yeah, definitely. And I think they also look in terms of like if you're a person that's entrepreneurial and you've got a business and an idea, what's your passion in this?
Yeah, exactly.
Super important. Are you really like committed to this? Is this something that you're going to like quit your job over, or is this something that you're just really doing on the side? So I mean, they're not idiots. They've got their sort of, I guess, due diligence criteria in terms of what they're looking for. And I guess whether you tick the boxes is another question, really.
And I guess it's for the better for both sides, because that also gives the opportunity to the person seeking funds to actually ask the questions and not be shy about approaching, I guess, unknown territories at that point. So, but yeah, I think what's important also for, I guess, for the people who are, I guess, looking at going kind of the same path as you do you have any advices for them, or anything that you can mention, whether it be good or bad advice?
I don't know. I think if I had a time machine, I said this again, if this wouldn't be the path I would have taken, really, but I'm here now. So I wouldn't want to say like, this is what you got to do to get here. I think the most important things I can say is just keep learning, always keep learning, and not just like through the usual medium of like books, classes, and sort of I guess the internet, but also from other people. Because I look back and the people say nowadays like I'm really good on the phones, but I didn't always used to be. And I remember from my first job, there was a guy that joined and he was really good on the phones. And I think he was from somewhere ridiculously random, like Corsica or somewhere. And I just remember how he just used to speak on the phone with his kind of like confidence and just the way he sort of approached it. And it's not like I just sort of sat there taking notes. I just sort of like eavesdropped on his conversation and just kind of like how his body language was, kinds of things he said, and I just took that on board. And it's really random because it's like, I don't think it's innate. You don't just become good at phones. You have to like learn how to sort of speak on the telephone, and it's something I picked up from him.
Yeah.
And you can't really read that from a book or something, I think.
Exactly.
So I think that there's always opportunities to like learn from somebody, even if it's tiny things like that, in terms of how a person carries themselves, or also it just could be like written things. So if you see someone that writes emails you like in a particular way, what do they use? What's their opening? What's their closing? That kind of thing. I think in terms of advice, I don't want to say, do this or do that to get into this or that. I think...
I think that was a great advice to begin with in terms of just learning from the best. Learning from the best, learning the best practices.
It doesn't have to be the best, because like...
learning the good.
just if you see them that's good, that somebody does in a good way, it's like, why not take it on board, really?
Exactly.
Because there's always something that you can always do better. Like, if you're cooking or something... why not watch like Gordon Ramsay and see what he does or something?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you just pick up like a little tip there. Okay, it's like, okay. It's like little minor things really that you can pick up. And I think from incremental changes that become like your behavior pattern if you take it on board and internalize it.
And also like just because of all these good advice from, I guess, an advice to yourself or for myself when I think about it is being able to reproduce this to somebody else. If ever I am able to be this kind of good practitioner of anything, and somebody else can get inspired from it. I think that's important from your point of view and also from my point of view at the end. So this is all amazing. Is there anywhere that people could follow you? What kind of stuff do you, social feed, anything?
Oh, no. I used to be on Twitter, but I just used to get arguments with random people. Like, I just thought it was a waste of time. I'm on Instagram, but I don't really want people following me, so
that's all
you can
good.
find me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, so
Oh, guys, check it out on LinkedIn. This was Amin on the podcast. Amin, thank you so much for being on the show.
No worries, you're welcome. Thank you.